So thank you all for attending tonight's meeting of HAGAS. This evening, our speaker is a science writer, a communicator, astronomer, astrophotographer and photographer, there's lots of fuzz, based in Bristol. He has been involved in astrophotography since 2005 and tonight will impart his attempts to produce a respectable photo of the night sky from his back garden in Bristol's light polluted city centre. Let us welcome and hand over to Lee Pullen.
Right, hello everyone. Let me see if I can share my screen. As mentioned, my name is Lee, and I suppose this presentation tonight is a bit of a my astro journey, kind of the steps I've taken, with the twist being that I do all of my astrophotography from Bristol, so I have very bad light pollution to contend with. A lot of people think that high light pollution means you can't really do astrophotography, but with a few tips and tricks, I think that actually it is possible. So our story begins 10 years ago, back in 2014, and I was living with my girlfriend in an apartment in the south of the city, and we didn't have a garden, we did have a balcony. And I would set my telescope up on that balcony and I would use the eyepiece. This is an actual photo of it. I would use the eyepiece and I would look through it and try to peer out into the cosmos to try and see anything. But the light pollution was so bad, I couldn't see anything. But I was into photography, so I used my faithful camera, my Nikon D700, and I attached that to the back of the telescope. And I used that to try and take some photos of the sky. I took a single photo. It has a strange color cast because I was experimenting with light pollution filters. Single photo, couldn't really see anything. But then I learned a bit about stacking, put a few photos together and then combine them and took images a bit like this. Not impressive at all by today's standards, but this kind of blew my mind, to be honest. This showed me that astrophotography lets us capture faint objects even from a light polluted city. And to my mind, this was like this opened my eyes. Okay, there's a lot of potential there. And I spent a very fun few months setting my telescope up on that balcony and just documenting the deep sky objects that I could see. So lots of galaxies there. And at the bottom, there's the Clifton Suspension Bridge as well, which is the actual view that I had through the telescope. And you can see just how bad all the light pollution is. Some examples of the best kind of pictures I was taking back then, 10 years ago. So we've got the Andromeda Galaxy there and the Pinwheel Galaxy. So that's the kind of level I was at 10 years ago. We then bought a house and we moved deeper into Bristol, deeper into the sky glow. That's about where I am now. And it's very close to Bristol Temple Meads train station. If you've ever been here, you might know that. Like very close to the centre. The light pollution really is awful. But this is where we set up, and every astrophoto you're going to see now for the rest of this presentation, it was taken from my back garden in the centre of Bristol. So Bortle 8 level light pollution. So we're in 2017 now. And I decided to take my astrophotography a bit more seriously. So I bought a new telescope, which is a Skywatcher ED80, I believe, and a guide scope on the side, a new mount, an Orion Sirius EQG, which is like a Skywatcher HEQ5 equivalent. And I got a lot of this stuff secondhand, got it on the cheap. And I did some research about cameras and realized that a proper astro camera was the way to go. And all the advice out there was saying mono, go mono. So I bought a mono camera and a filter wheel and all the gubbins to go along with it. And I started experimenting about with that. And here are some of the photos that I took. I got this one of the Rosette Nebula, which I was quite happy with. And the North America Nebula. I remember being very pleased at getting all those blues and the turquoise colors out in there. And another example photo is the California Nebula, where I just thought, well, I'm going to make it look as vibrant as I can just to experiment, trying out different color palettes. And all of this taught me that a mono camera plus narrowband filters is very effective from a city, but it was complex and it was expensive to set up as well. So a little bit of time passed by. My girlfriend became my wife, and we had a new member of the family. This is my daughter, who we named Juno after the space probe, because my wife is a big space geek too. And Juno is fantastic. And if you've had kids, you'll know it kind of changes your perspective on things. And I was working at this point running the planetarium in Bristol. That was a full-time job. But along comes Juno, and I think, well, I'm going to have a bit of a change. So I decided to quit that job and to become self-employed. And I set up two companies. One is about science communication, so I do science writing, and the other is photography. That's regular daytime photography. So having this new daughter and setting up these businesses was taking up a lot of time. And I found that I just didn't have any spare time at all. I didn't have the headspace. I was very sleep deprived. Didn't have any time for astrophotography. And I wasn't using any of this kit. So I formulated a plan, which was to sell all of this kit, or almost all of it actually, not the mount. The mount was a bargain. I thought I was going to keep that, sell everything except for the mount, and come back to the hobby when Juno was in school, so 4 or 5 years' time, and when I'd have a bit more time to put into the hobby. And that was my plan. So I sold most of the kit. But the thing is that about 6 months went by, and I was really missing the astrophotography. I was thinking, was it a mistake selling everything? So I decided to get back into it, but this time I would design a setup that was as easy to use as possible. Because I thought about visual astronomers. And when you talk to visual astronomers about telescopes, the advice is the best telescope is the one you'll use the most. But when you talk to astrophotographers about what's the best setup, it immediately gets complicated by what camera types and just okay, keep it simple. What am I going to be able to use the most? So I bought an Askar FRA 400, which is a small refractor, a wide field refractor, just 72 millimeters in diameter, but very robust, quite easy to use. I had a new guiding setup, and I bought an electronic autofocuser and an ASI Air Pro to control everything. And very importantly, I actually bought a one-shot color camera. And this was against all of the advice, because the advice was mono is definitely best, especially if you're in a light polluted city. You'd be mad to go OSC. But the thing is, I'd done a bit of mono and I could see the benefits, but I just wanted something that was streamlined, that would be easy to use. And around this time, there was a new device on the market, which was an Optolong L Extreme filter, which I expect you've heard of. If not, it is a special kind of filter you slot in front of the camera, and it allows you to capture hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3 narrowband wavelengths, but using a one-shot color camera. So I got all of this kit together, and my first imaging project was the Hart Nebula. And this was the picture that I produced from the center of Bristol. And I was happy with this because it was I considered a higher quality than the pictures that I'd got before, which perhaps isn't surprising because I was using a more expensive telescope and a more expensive camera. But it also was a proof of concept that OSE cameras plus dual band filters do work well even from a city. So maybe there was hope for me, even in my sleep deprived state with very little free time. Maybe I could actually carry on doing some astrophotography. Now, after I posted that image, one of my astro friends said, "You need to learn PixInsight. PixInsight is really good," they said, "but complicated. It's a piece of software to edit your pictures. I suspect some of you will use it already." So I started to learn a bit of PixInsight, but also I thought I'm going to do things in my own way, and I'm going to also edit my photos using Adobe Lightroom. This is, I describe it as, it's like Photoshop for photographers. And Lightroom I'm very comfortable with because of the daytime photography that I was doing. So I knew a lot about Lightroom. So I decided to use PixInsight and Lightroom to edit my pictures. That was the original. And then by learning a little bit about the processing, I managed to pull out more data. And this is the image that I produced in the end. And this taught me another valuable lesson, which is that image processing is as important as data acquisition. I think this is a really key point that a lot of people don't quite grasp. What you do with your data, how you edit it, is as important as getting the data in the first place. I think of it as a bit of being like a hammer and nails approach. You need both to do a good job. So with all this in mind, I then went off and had a few little imaging projects just to have some fun. Took a photo of the moon. I do very little solar system work. I'm almost exclusively deep sky, so this is quite a rare picture, but I was quite happy with how that one turned out. And then there was a nova that appeared, which I managed to capture. I was quite chuffed with that. Think of the sky as being eternal. It doesn't ever really change, but these kind of things, yeah, that's quite cool to be able to capture that. Talking of things changing, I had a run of 5 almost clear nights and managed to capture Royd Vesta hurtling across the skies of Bristol. I did some calculations on this. Let me just check my notes. I got its average speed being 19.4 kilometers per second, and I worked out how long it was between the first and the last image. And during this animation, during these 5 nights, it traveled about 6.5 million kilometers. And this kind of planted a seed in my mind. It's neat to take pictures, but when you can do a bit more with them, you can like explain some scientific concept, or you can find out something neat. I think it harked back to my work doing science communication in the planetarium and writing news articles and things like how can you use something like an image or an animation as a hook to get people more interested in space. And then I went a little bit arty with this one. This was the North Celestial Pole. If you can see my mouse cursor, can you see that on your screen? Yeah, just about. That's Polaris there. That's the North Star. And this was an exposure time of 6 hours. I just turned the mount off so you can see everything moving around it. I remember when I posted this online, actually, I said that this is Polaris. And so many people, astrophotographers and astronomers, said, no, you're wrong. Polaris is exactly over the North Celestial Pole. So that can't be Polaris because it's removing. So I had to try and explain, well, actually, it's not exactly over the North Celestial Pole. It's just close by. So I was having fun with all of this, but I wanted to do a bit more. I wanted to have more deep sky objects. And I did some research, and minds far greater than my own helped to explain to me about signal to noise ratio and the benefits of capturing lots and lots and lots of data and then stacking that into one image. So I did an experiment. I chose an object which is very faint, the Iris Nebula, and I took lots and lots of images of it. And I made integrations. You can see them here of 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, all the way up to 20 hours. Because I wanted to see how much of a difference it would actually make if I went for longer integrations. And I think, I hope you can see it well on your screen. You can see the initial difference, 2 to 4 to 6 hours, is quite stark. You get quite a good improvement quite quickly. Then you still get improvements, but it peters out, if you will. If we were to look at this in this, visualize it as this GIF, on the left-hand side, this is a close-up of 2 hour integration. And then on the right-hand side, we're going from 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 hours. And we can see that background gets smoother and smoother over time. Because the more data we have, the stronger the signal gets and the weaker the noise level gets, because we can average out the noise. The signal is consistent, the noise is more random in nature. Not if you know what I'm talking about. You're astrophotographer, so you kind of get the gist of all of this. If I give this talk to non-experts, then I talk a bit more about the background of signal to noise ratio, but I don't think I need to do that with you guys. But so what I did was create a graph of the noise level against the integration time. So the noise level, when we start out here, 2 hours, is really, really high. I think noise is electrons per pixel per second or something like that, but really, really high to start with. And then it kind of matches what we saw in the Iris Nebula images there. It goes down fairly quickly to start with, then we get to about 6 hours, and then the noise level still reduces, but it's an inverse square law, so it's not quite as dramatic. And a lot of people look at this kind of graph and conclude, well, okay, you get your most bang for your buck after about 6 hours. So maybe from my back garden in the centre of Bristol, I should spend about 6 hours on a target. But I looked at this and thought, well, it's true, 6 hours does seem to be a good figure, but if you keep going and keep going and keep going, if you get to 20 hours or more, you've reduced that noise level by a lot over that 6 hours. Okay, it took a long time, but maybe we can actually get something pretty good from a city if we have these really long integration times. So I decided to give it a go. I put in 20.5 hours in the end and got this photo of the Iris Nebula, which I was very happy with at the time. Faint object from the centre of Bristol, and the lights are so bad. There's skyscrapers going up around, not quite skyscrapers, the very tall buildings going up around me. And I'm so close to the centre. When I'm in my garden setting up, I can hear the announcements from Bristol Temple Meads, the main train station. The next train to arrive at platform 4. So it's like all this sky glow, but I'm still able to do this. So I concluded from this that long integration times are key to getting that high image quality through the light pollution of a city. But you might be thinking, it's all well and good in theory, but like 20 hours or more, like it's cloudy a lot of the time. How can we actually do this? Well, remote automation is absolutely key. You can't be doing this, you can't be having this approach if you're having to be sat outside at the telescope clicking a button every time you want to take an image. It just doesn't work. So you need a method of remote automation. And there are lots that are out there, but I really like the ASI Air series of controllers. That's a little red box here. Everything plugs in. You need to be using ZWO branded products, but I like their stuff and I had it all already, so that was no problem. I just liked that it was quite simple. But that's not even the main tip that I would give if you want long integration times. It's actually to optimize your setup and your pack down. So up until this point, I was using a tripod, and I would carry the tripod outside and I would set it up and I would have to polar align everything. And I took no joy in that. It was a right old hassle. But I suppose what I was thinking is what a lot of astrophotographers from cities think, which is I'll have a portable setup that I'll take out to a dark sky whenever I can. And then when I can't, I'll just set it up in my garden and we'll see how it goes. But I just I didn't have any time to travel out to dark skies. And what I was doing was having this portable setup that I would have to put in the garden every time and go through all the processes. It wasn't working too well. So what I did instead was double down on being a city astrophotographer. And I got a DIY buddy of mine to help me make this concrete block pier in my garden. It is not high tech at all. It's 2 concrete blocks that one of my neighbours was getting rid of. So I kindly said, can I help you dispose of these? And I carried these concrete blocks back home. We poured some concrete into the base, which is down there, drilled some bolts through it. And then I can't even remember how much this mounting plate was. This was the most expensive thing, £100, something like that. Mounting plate we put on top and then permanently mounted this Orion Sirius EQG class mount on the top. That way, all my setup was just carrying the telescope out of the shed and putting it on the mount. Even all the electrics I put in this waterproof box and they just live out there. My setup time for this kit, let's say I see that it's clear skies. I'm in my living room, I see it's clear skies. Okay, I'm going to set up. I go outside, open the shed, put the telescope on, set up the ASI Air, begin the imaging run. We're talking about 3.5, 4 minutes, something like that. Very, very fast. Couldn't get it much faster. Now, something like a roll-off roof shed or a portable or a dome, something, sure, that would be even better, but I didn't have the budget or the space or the time to create anything like that. So this kind of setup actually was really, really good. And when not in use, I would just put a waterproof cover over the mount. Sometimes I'd even leave the telescope out there and put the cover over it to protect it from seagulls using it for target practice, as they like to do. But all this did was make it really, really fast to set up. And what I found was that it was so easy to set the telescope up that I was far more likely to actually do it. So with a tripod, I would be waiting for an entirely clear night, like a perfect night. There's not a cloud in the sky. Okay, that's when I'm going to go and set everything up. But with this approach, just any hint of clear skies, if there's just going to be an hour of clear skies, well, fine, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to risk it because it's so easy to set up and pack down. And after doing that, I found that my integration times would get very high very quickly because all those small gaps in the cloud, those 1, 2, 3 hour nights all add up. And by abandoning the tripod and doubling down is doing everything from my garden, that's when I could get really long integration times. So I would say don't find excuses to not image. If you think there's going to be some clear skies, just absolutely go for it. And by doing all of that, I found that I could get the hours up like surprisingly quickly. I think of urban astrophotography as being a marathon, not a sprint. I would take anywhere between 2 weeks to 2 months for a project to get really long integration times. So let me show you some more example images. This is IC1369. Did I get that the wrong way around? 1396. Anyway, part of this is the Elephant's Trunk Nebula, this part here. And I took this image and I was very happy with this one actually, because it was the first time I'd got some really good colors in the images with the Optolong L Extreme. And I did that by creating a pseudo sulfur 2 channel. I kind of split the RGB up and mixed it all up and kind of reproduced a mono setup. And I thought it worked quite effectively. And this was in the Sky at Night magazine. I think this might be one of the only images I get published. I haven't got much published at all, but yeah, this one was, so I was quite happy with that. And the whole idea of splitting those channels and playing about with them reinforced that image processing is as important as data acquisition, which is the point that I made earlier. Now, at this point in our story, Juno, my daughter, started in nursery, so I had a little bit of free time. What a luxury. And I decided to pursue one of my ambitions that I'd had for a long time. It's not a grand ambition, but I wanted to learn a bit about making websites. I've had websites before for my businesses, but I hadn't ever made anything in WordPress and done it more or less manually. So I thought, well, I'm going to do this, but what should I make the website about? Well, why not astrophotography? And the original idea was for urban astrophotography to basically be a glorified gallery where I could just put my images and learn a bit about website processing. But as I got into it, I started writing articles like how-tos and gear reviews and things like that, and it started to grow. And I realized that a lot of the way I was doing things and my approaches was counter to what I refer to as the conventional wisdom, what most astrophotographers were saying should be done. So for example, if we just go back to this image here, this was all taken from a city. I didn't travel at all to any dark skies. It was taken using a small telescope. It's quite a faint object. I used an OSC camera. I didn't use mono. This was imaged entirely over the summer, where we didn't have any proper astronomical darkness at all. It was all imaged during twilight, really. There was often a bright moon nearby, so I didn't wait for there to be a new moon or anything like that. I processed it in an unusual way, using splitting those channels to try and replicate the Hubble palette. And I also process it partly using Adobe Lightroom, which no other astrophotographers do. So doing all of that made me think that you really need to question conventional wisdom and don't be afraid to try new approaches. Because if I just stuck with what the people like on Facebook and forums and things were saying, I wouldn't be doing this kind of thing at all. So I like to try and mix it up. Let me try and show you a few more images then. So here we have the Pelican Nebula. This was another hydrogen alpha oxygen 3 image. So this was Octalong L Extreme. This was an integration time of 26 hours. And you'll know what it's like. When you look at images you've taken, all you see is what's wrong with them. This one is a bit too plasticky because I used topaz denoise on this one, and I over-egged it a bit, so it's a bit too smooth. But still, there's quite a lot of detail there. So it's not too bad. And then we have the Rosette Nebula. This was 15 hours. Some nice differences in the colors there. Maybe a bit too lurid. I'll do it a bit more tastefully nowadays, I think. But yeah, your approach changes over time, doesn't it? But still, there's some nice detail there in the center. Then another 15-hour project here, which is the Cygnus Loop. I really liked that ASCAR FRA 400 telescope because it was so wide field. You could get some really big objects in there. And when I was editing this, I thought I think this, is it the Flying Bat Nebula, this bit at the left, really looked a bit like a xenomorph. It's a xenomorph nebula, that one. You'll never be able to see it as anything but now. And then I took the filter out, didn't use any filter at all, and imaged the Andromeda Galaxy for 24 hours. And remember, you might be thinking these time frames, they're completely ludicrous, right? Like 24 hours, how long does it take to do that? It's not that long. It's generally a couple of weeks. And when your setup and pack down is so fast, the actual amount of time you spend setting equipment up and things, it's like maybe an hour per project, per image, something like that. It's really not that long. It's often less time than it's spent just setting the tripod up once and polar aligning and getting everything just right. The peer really is really good. So at this point, we're getting into this is like late 2021 now. I decided I wanted to try and image some fainter objects, ones that were a bit less well known. So I went for NGC 7822, which is not very often photographed because it's quite faint. But using that Octalong L Extreme, I got something which is quite cool, actually. I quite like this. It's a bit of an unusual view. I don't think I've seen any other reproductions of this image quite like this. You've got that swooping material out on the left, and it seems quite turbulent and dynamic in the center. About 3,000 light years away from Earth as well. It's nuts. Then I went for one that was really faint. Got the Lion Nebula. This was 28 hours. But it didn't take too long. I think it was just a couple of weeks. This, not too long. Some nice differentiations in color there as well, which you can really bring out during the processing. Because remember, the processing is as important as data acquisition. Then we have the Cave Nebula. It's another one that I don't see come up very often. I might return to it soon, actually. Try and get an even better image of it, focusing on it. Yeah. And there's lots of nice texture. Can you see that over the right-hand side? I hope it comes across well in your screen. That was an 18-hour project, that one. And then I took one of my favorite images, actually. So if you don't like any of the images so far, you have to say ooh or ah to this one, because I think it's pretty neat. This was the Pleiades. This was without any filters, so no special filters at all. My camera, it's a 2600 MC, has an inbuilt UVIR filter. So I don't need to put an extra one of those in. No light pollution filters or anything like that, just pure integration time. This was over 2 weeks. So yeah, 22 hours. The other thing that's quite noteworthy about this image is that often astrophotographers will say, oh, I don't image when the moon is up or the moon is full, or I'll only do narrow band when the moon is up. For this image, the moon was really close by, and it was a full moon during the course of my imaging run for this. So it was absolutely horrendous gradients from the moon. But if you're good with your processing, if you're clever with it, actually it doesn't really matter. So I don't care what the moon is doing. For me, it's a binary decision as to whether I'll image or not. Are the skies going to be clear at all during the night? If they are, then I'm going to be imaging. If it's completely cloudy or it's going to rain, then no, I won't. It's just a binary decision. I don't think, oh, is the moon out? Is it? Am I going to wait until new? Forget all that. It doesn't matter. We lose so many nights because people are thinking, oh, the moon is up, I shouldn't image where the moon is up. Doesn't matter. Even if the moon is right next to your object, there's still signal that you can collect from there, and it all adds up.
Nice dust.
It is nice, isn't it? Thank you for noticing. All this faint dust that comes around here, and there's a little bitty galaxy. Can you see it there? Yeah. When you have the long integration times, you see deep. I think that's a cool thing. You can see really deep. Here we have the Crescent Nebula, another L extreme image, 25 hours, this one. A bit unusual because you've normally with the Crescent Nebula, it's taken with longer focal length telescopes, which really focus in on the crescent itself. But it's pretty neat with a wide field view. You see all this hydrogen that's glowing around here. And when I was processing this, I found a little like bubble in the view, and I thought I'd messed something up in my processing. I thought it was always an artifact from my processing. Have I done a bodge job here? But then I looked it up and realized, no, this is actually a planetary nebula. This is the Soap Bubble Nebula, and it had only been discovered 15 years before. But I tell you, when I saw that and I looked at it, oh, it's amazing. It felt like I discovered it myself, just because I didn't expect it at all. And I think that's one of the amazing things about when you do really go for these long integrations. You see deep and you can discover, say, well, maybe not with my pictures, with my light pollution, with the best tool in the world, I'm probably not going to discover something, but it feels like you're discovering. You still get that emotion. So I was having a whale of a time doing these long integration times. And I started to think, well, how far can I push this? How faint an object can I actually image from Bristol? So I did some research and came across the Shark Nebula. Have you heard of this one? This is one that's legendarily faint. So faint that people, like this chap here, the Galactic Hunter, travel out to the desert specifically to be able to image it because it's so faint. That's what the Galactic Hunter did. Drove 2 hours north to a Portal 2 zone. That's what he did. But surely it's not possible to image this from the center of a city. It'd be madness to even try, right? Look, it can be done. Can be done. I did some Googling and searching on Astrobin and the like, and when I took this, I couldn't find anyone else that had imaged it from a city. Probably someone had done, but I like to think I was the first person to capture this from a city. Even if it's not true, it makes me feel happy. We've got some nice nebulosity here as well. And there's a little galaxy in the fin of the shark. Yeah, cool. I was having a good time posting these kind of pictures on astronomy groups and saying, look, this is from a city. And I would get people that would reply saying, no, you can't do this from a city. It can't be done. And they'd very patiently explain to me why it's not possible to image objects that were this faint from a city. And I would be saying, but look, it's there, it exists. I'm not talking about some theory. This is what can be done because I have done it. So I thought, is there something that's even fainter, that's even more difficult to see from a city that would really blow some minds? So I went for the Flying Bat and the Squid Nebulae from the center of Bortlake city centre with a one-shot colour camera. Right, 28 hours went into this, and I really pushed the data. I pushed it further than I should have done, to be honest. The background is really mottled. I shouldn't draw your attention to that. Just look at the cool bit. Look at the cool bit over here. But proof of concept, it could be done. And if I'd gone for a longer integration time, then quality could have improved even more. Now we are up to September 2022, so the recent past, and I decided that I had maxed out what could be done with that little ASCAR FRA 400. and I wanted a new telescope and some new challenges. So I bought this big boy, an ASCAR 130. It has a focal length of 1,000 millimeters, and it's heavy. It's so heavy with everything attached, I can only just lift it up and put it onto the mount. So I actually needed to buy a new mount. The old faithful, that Orion Sirius, died a death, unfortunately. So I bought an EQ6, but still all mounted on the pier. All the other kit is the same camera, importantly, still a one-shot color camera. And I thought I would experiment with this. And some new kit did actually come out around this time. So an Optolong L Ultimate filter, which I bought. It's like the L Extreme, but with narrower band passes, so a little bit better. And also, have you heard of the ASCAR D2 filter? This is a very interesting one because it doesn't capture just hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3 like the L Extreme and L Ultimate, but sulfur 2 and oxygen 3. So playing about with these, would it be possible to recreate more accurately a mono setup but using a one-shot color camera? Well, maybe. So I'm going to go up on a slight tangent now and talk a little bit about OSC or mono. And this is something that I don't generally talk about in presentations because my presentations are often to non-experts or at least non-astrophotographers. And if you're not an astrophotographer, OSC or mono, it doesn't interest you, it doesn't interest those people at all. But if you're an astrophotographer, then actually you are quite interested in this. So let me give you my thoughts on OSC and mono. So mono certainly offers a higher image quality, but I would say in theory. So what do I mean by that? Well, you don't have your Bayer matrix, so you can have higher resolutions and you can get to your required signal to noise ratio even faster because you're using all the pixels, all those kind of things that we know about. However, you've got to consider other factors as well. For example, think about the allocation of your budget. Now, a mono setup costs about 50% more than an equivalent generation one-shot color. So to keep the math simple, let's say you spent about £2,000 on a one-shot color setup with a couple of filters. You would need to spend about £3,000 to get that equivalent with mono. Obviously, it's going to vary based on the quality and new and secondhand and all that jazz, but about that. So that, let's just take that £1,000 difference. We're all on a budget, and if you're maxing out your budget, I would argue that that £1,000 would be better spent on making it easy to collect lots of data to have higher integration times. For example, with that £1,000, you could have a pier like I have. You could have the waterproof cover, a method of remote automation. You could have an electronic autofocuser. You could spend some money on a PixInsight license. You could do lots and lots of different things that might actually get you more bang for your buck than spending the money on that mono camera. And also you have to consider ease of use. If a one-shot color camera is easier to set up and use, then you might be more inclined to actually go out there and use it. Because if something's really complicated, you're more likely to think of excuses to not use it. And new filters hugely increase the versatility of one-shot color cameras. It's not quite like it was in the old days where you didn't have these special dual band filters. But I would also say that you're not in one camp for life. You might like to, like I did, I was one-shot color, then went mono, and now I'm one-shot color again. But in the future, when I buy a new camera, I might go back to mono because it might be like the challenge that I want to do at that point. But really, the most important thing I'd say is integration time and your processing skills. That's far more important than the type of camera that you're using. This is a controversial opinion. I have a few controversial opinions. That's one of them. A lot of astrophotographers would say, no, that's not the case. But actually, I think it is. And I might demonstrate that in a moment. But ultimately, the question is, what would you find most fun to use? Because this is a hobby that should be fun. And one of the reasons I kind of get on my soapbox about OSC and mono is that so much of the very vocal, forceful advice that's given is that mono is definitely better, especially if you're from imaging from a light polluted city. You have to go mono because that's going to give you the highest quality. But I know that if I'd done that, if I'd followed that advice, I don't think I'd be imaging now. Because when I was getting back into this, when Juno was just a baby and I didn't have the headspace for it, I consciously chose to ignore that advice and go one-shot color. And I'm so glad that I did. Because if I'd gone mono, I think I would have packed it all in again because it was just a bit too frustrating. But nowadays, I don't know, maybe I would consider, like I said, if new cameras came out, I would consider mono. I wouldn't necessarily go for it, but I'd think, what am I going to find most fun? Do I want a bit more of a challenge? Now, I've done something that might be a bit cheeky. You have to be the judge. But I was watching on your YouTube channel one of your recent presentations by Patrick Cosgrove, the Cosgrove's Cosmos stuff. Really good presentation. I thought that was really top tier. If anyone's watching this presentation and they online and they haven't seen that one, you should go and watch that one as well. It was really good, really insightful. And he seems like a lovely chap and had lots of useful information. And I'd been to his website before, but after seeing that presentation, I went back and had a bit more of a deep dive. And I was very excited to see that he had imaged the Elephant Trunk Nebula using the mono equivalent of my one-shot color camera, the 2600 series. And in his presentation, he talked about how much he enjoys mono. And he linked on his website up to his Astrobin, where you could download the full resolution Elephant Trunk Nebula. So what I have done is, and I hope he doesn't mind, he seems like a really cool guy, so I think he'd be all right with it. I've taken his image and I've taken my image of the same object and I've lined it up. And this is as fair a comparison as I think I can kind of make in the circumstances, because they were both taken with 130mm refractors, same generation camera, but one-shot color, one mono. And they were also both taken almost to the same month, actually. So there's the same kind of processing equipment out there. Now, my question is, can you tell which one is one-shot color and which one is mono? Is it hard to tell?
B is the one-shot color. I think that's fair.
B is the one-shot color. Why is B the one-shot color?
Something about the color fading. The one on the left.
The color palette.
The contrast.
Color palette. Okay.
There's more light, you know.
Yeah. And that would follow because no Bayer matrix is more efficient at gathering light, right? Yeah. And does A look a bit sharper?
Yeah.
That could be processing though.
It could be post-processing, yeah. I think a good thing to look for is the detail in this part.
We can't see your mouse.
Oh, you can't see it, but sorry, in the kind of the top eye. Oh, that's annoying that you can't see it. Well, never mind. There's like two stars that are close together, and there's other detail. Okay, so B is one-shot color.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a laser pointer here. So there's like a double star to the right of the eye.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Does that surprise you?
I mean, I think with the same camera, I think to be fair, I think Patrick's got some slightly darker sky, hasn't he, where he lives?
Well, yes, Patrick has darker skies, but B, you were thinking would be the one-shot color, is actually the mono.
Oh, right.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
You see?
Yeah.
I'm flipping back and forth. Is that coming over?
Yeah. Not what I thought at all.
Not what you thought. Exactly. Exactly. Not what I thought either.
Yeah.
Because we have all this, and this is in no way like putting anything down on Patrick's images. They're absolutely fantastic. I was just really happy to see this as an example with similar telescopes. But we just are told so often that, oh, you get higher resolution and the quality is better with the mono, that we kind of take it for granted. But actually, it's the integration time and it's the processing that goes into it that makes the bigger difference. This is what I think anyway, and I think this kind of thing backs it up. but mine does have a much longer integration time. So this is my full image. This was 22 hours. And this is Patrick's full image. And his integration time was, I looked up on his website, it was 7.3 hours. So it was much, much shorter integration time. But then again, he's from Bortle 5 and I'm from Bortle 8, and that's a huge difference. So it would be amazing to like do a fairer comparison. And if you were to actually have the mono set up in my garden and do it all exactly, then and process them in the same way, then I do think the mono one would probably come out on top. But like realistically, we don't operate like that, do we? What in the real world, what is the better setup? And I think it's just the one that you're going to have more fun using and makes it easier to get those long integration times, because that is the key, I think. Anyway, so that was a little bit of a tangent about OSC and mono, and just how I don't think we should get blinkered into mono is the way to do it. And Patrick certainly didn't do that in his presentation. I think he gave a very fair and balanced appraisal of the pros and cons. Okay, so we've got the Sol Nebula next. This was a 27-hour project. Got 10 hours of L Ultimate there, and 14 hours of ASCAR D2 all mixed in to give us some nice colors. And what I also did was, after a recommendation from a helpful chap on an astronomy forum, they said, well, you really need to start putting in some proper RGB stars. So I took 3 hours of data without any filter in at all, so that I could have accurate star color in the picture. I hadn't done that before. I thought it turned out quite nicely, actually. And around this point, we had some new processing tools come onto the market, Noise Exterminator and Blur Exterminator, most notably. And I got some good results with those. I liked, this is a comparison using a Noise Exterminator, sorry. So any kind of tool that can help to improve our signal to noise ratio, I think is a good thing. And after these tools were released and I'd learned more about processing, I went back and re-edited some of my earlier work, which I think is a useful thing for astrophotographers to do. Do you remember this Iris Nebula picture that I took back at the beginning? I reprocessed that, all the same data, and I think got a better result. But even now I can see lots of flaws with it, so maybe I'd like to return to it again. And the Lion Nebula, I edited again and produced this, which I think looks very different, actually. Very different, yeah. I think that looks pretty classy, actually. I like the golds and the blues in that one. But some targets don't need crazy long integration times. Here we've got M13, which is just 8 hours, which is a relatively short one for me. The thing I find noteworthy about this is that I managed to get nice, sharp stars in a way that I wasn't able to do with the wide field refractor. So that extra aperture of the 130mm refractor came across quite nicely here, I think. And then the Orion Nebula. Now I was thinking, actually when I was putting these slides together, I was thinking of Patrick's presentation again, because he was talking about how he has, he's got lots of trees either side of his driveway and his observing site. So he's got a limited amount of time in which to image his targets. Now I'm blessed with a slightly wider field of view from my garden. However, for the Orion Nebula, I am quite boxed in by my chimney and some trees in the park and the neighbour's house and fence. So to get the Orion Nebula, I had to be a bit like Patrick and just get it a few hours at a time when it was just in the right position. This was mostly L Ultimate data, but also a little bit of RGB in there for the Running Man, which is over on the right-hand side. And I was doing some research on this and discovered that about 2 million years ago, there were some extra stars in the trapezium in the center. There were 2 pairs of binary stars and they were orbiting each other. And one of those stars got flung out into space. It's what's called a runaway star. And that can be found now as the flaming star in the Flaming Star Nebula. So it was the brightest one we can see here. And this is a combination of hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3 data, which I combined with RGB data. And that's because this nebula is an emission nebula and a reflection nebula. So using OSC, you can mix and match your filters to produce different effects in a way similar to you can with mono. However, if you do that, then the processing does get quite complicated. And so I'm harking on about OSC and mono again, aren't I? One of the things that's often said that's good about OSC is that the processing is simpler than mono. But when you get to this kind of level where you're using all these different filters, I would say that the processing with OSC can be simpler than mono. It has the potential to be, but when you're splicing up all these channels, I would say it's about the same level of complexity. So one of the things that's said as a good thing about OSC, I think maybe isn't actually true when you get to this level anyway. Here we have the Butterfly Nebula, this is quite a long one actually, wasn't it? 35.5 hours. So that's using those 2 dual band filters and mixing in some RGB for the stars. Now you'll notice the RGB is only 30 minutes, because by this point I realized that the stars are being point sources. They're so bright relative to the background nebulosity that actually to get the star color, you don't need long integrations at all. When I started doing the star color, I was doing it for that Sol Nebula picture, wasn't it? Like 3 hours or so, 3 hours of integration. But for this one, it's just 30 minutes, but you still get the accurate colors come through. So now when I'm doing my star colors, I do it really quickly. Spend all the time on the nebulosity instead. That's where it counts. This was the Butterfly Nebula. I don't know if you've come across it before. It's in Cygnus, part of that huge region. And one of the things I like about having the longer focal length telescope is scanning the skies in whatever software you want to use and really picking out what kind of framing you want to go for. I try to use my photographer's eye in that. What's an interesting image within this wider one? Also, I'm too lazy to do mosaics. And then we have the Cygnus Wall, which is perhaps my favorite image to date. So this is another one you have to say, ooh, at. I think this one looks pretty neat. This was 40 hours. If you notice, my integration times are creeping up and up and up. I originally was thinking, oh, I'm going to aim for 20 hours, but it's a bit addictive when you see all this detail come through. Instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to get one more target in tonight, you think, oh, I'm going to get one more night into this target. And you just keep going and keep going and keep going. Do it for weeks and weeks and weeks. This is another one I think could be easily mistaken for a high-end mono system, but it's actually OSC, just splitting out those colors, those channels. Yeah, I think that worked out. There's some nice detail in the head of the Cygnus Wall there. This view is about 20 light years long. I did the maths on this. It's the view that we've got here is 1.3 million times further than the distance between the Earth and the Sun.
Yeah.
I know, but I've only got 5 minutes left. I've talked a lot, so just do a couple more pictures. So here we have the ghost of Cassiopeia. And this is another target that is an emission nebula, I think, and a reflection nebula. So to get the best of that, we need to use our ultimate data filter, to get the hydrogen alpha and the RGB in order to get the reflection nebulosity. This certainly would be more efficient in mono, though, because there isn't really much oxygen-3 in there, so that's a bit of a waste with the ultimate filter. You would do better just to use the hydrogen alpha filter. But still, it was simple to get, and the fact that the whole process was simple meant I was more likely to go out there and actually just gather all of the data. I got some cool facts about the star, actually. I've got my notes here. The star at the top left is called Gamma Cass. It's 20 times more massive and 65,000 times brighter than the sun. It rotates at 1.6 million kilometers per hour. So 10 years ago, this was my best Andromeda Galaxy picture. Now, this is my best Andromeda Galaxy picture. Good example of not bothering to go with mosaics, but instead just try to get a bit of an interesting framing. But all these stars, so many stars, they're all line of sight, aren't they, between us and the galaxy? But are they? If we were to go back in time 100 years, this would be the best telescope in the world, the Hooker 100-inch, famously used by Edwin Hubble here. And he was searching for these Cepheid variable stars, wasn't he? to try and work out if these distant nebulae were actually beyond our own galaxy. And he found Cepheid variable V1, which was the standard candle beyond our own galaxy. And I managed to track it down in my image. It's there, that little dot, nicknamed the star that changed the universe. I managed to capture it in the center of Bristol. Yes. Increasingly, I'm enjoying hunting down objects within the pictures that I take. Because when I take these pictures, I'm not really thinking about what are the faint things within them. But once I process the image, then it's a bit like treasure hunting, looking through them. Right, let's have one more picture. So the Pinwheel Galaxy, this was what I took 14 years ago. And my more recent image is also my longest integration time project. I went a bit crazy just for fun. This was 100 hours. What? I don't know quite what I was thinking. Just wanted to keep going and seeing how good I could get it. So it's 70 hours of RGB, but also 30 hours of hydrogen alpha in there and oxygen 3. But again, the oxygen 3 is a bit of a waste, but the hydrogen alpha shows those glowing regions of star formation in the spiral arms there. During the course of this project, actually managed to catch a supernova, if that's showing up on your screen in that GIF. This is the closest I'd come to ever actually discovering something. It was cloudy when it was actually discovered. There was an astronomer in Japan that caught it. So, I feel like I came within a whisker of actually finding something. But maybe if I keep going, I'll discover a supernova or something. Now, I was giving a presentation about astrophotography to another group. And at the questions at the end, there was a tongue-in-cheek question about, well, how close off Hubble are you? Well, I laughed at that. But on the train on the way home, I was thinking, well, I wonder, what is it like if I compare this picture with a Hubble image? So this is my picture, and then this is the Hubble Space Telescope. I can flip back. This is my one. And then this is Hubble. Now, they look fairly similar like this. To be fair, the Hubble one is crazy high resolution. So you could zoom in a lot into this picture and it would still look good. My one looks mushy as soon as you do any zooming. So it's not at all a fair comparison. But having said that, I've got some faint spiral arms at the top there. I wish I could point them out, but Hubble didn't get those. I guess it was how it was processed. You've got the darker contrast. But I got some spiral arms that weren't in the Hubble. I also got that supernova, but of course Hubble didn't get that because it wasn't there when it happened. But using that L ultimate meant that I got the hydrogen alpha data, which is showing up as the glowing areas, which is also is pretty, but also of scientific interest because it shows the regions of star formation. That's not there in the Hubble image. So I guess overall I'd be willing to call it a draw between me and Hubble. I'll be very gracious. So let me summarize what I would describe as the urban astrophotography approach. And what I've learned is you want to make it as easy as you can to collect data. Don't put obstacles in your way. Make it easy to set up, to pack down, whatever you can do to make it easy. If you want the high integration, if you want the high image quality, then aim for long integration times. That really is key. That's what gets you your high image quality. Remember that processing is absolutely vital. It's as important as your data acquisition. Always be learning things, always try out new techniques, always grow as an imager, and experiment and have fun. Always remember, most important thing is to have fun. So if you have fun by finding lots of targets in one night and not going for the long integration times, then that's the way to do it. If you have fun by having different filters and doing mono setups and playing about with that, then do that. If you have fun by having a simple workflow, then maybe go OSC. Whatever you're having fun with is the most important thing. And talking of having fun, my daughter Juno is always having lots of fun. She is now 5 years old, and over dinner today, she very patiently explained to me that the sun is a star, not a planet. So something I'm doing is obviously rubbing off. Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, that is 1 hour and 1 minute. So sorry for going over, but not bad, pretty close. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
very much. It's really interesting. I'd just like to add, I also started shooting the Pinwheel Galaxy a day after that supernova appeared. And I didn't know. And I was shooting it for 2 weeks. And on about the 5th day, I heard about the supernova. So I went back through and I could see the supernova getting brighter each night. I was shooting it.
Yeah.
It started to expand. But yeah, I was lucky enough to capture that as well. But yeah, you can imagine if I'd actually just started a few days earlier and seen it without. Although I did have one from the previous year anyway, so I've got the two comparisons.
Oh, you can compare, yes.
But there was one guy on, I think it was Astrophotography on Facebook, I can't remember, but he managed to capture it the day before, and he showed he put each night's, stacking up and showed supernova getting larger and larger and larger. It was really good.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, it's amazing that these things can happen when we're imaging things. We just need some luck, really.
Yeah. It's amazing they're going off all the time, aren't they? It's just actually practical. Yeah, but it was a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Lee, I have a question. So, well, first of all, I absolutely am in your camp with one-shot colour cameras for exactly the same reason as you. I've got the same camera. Exposure times and gain. So do you use 101 as the standard gain?
Gain 100.
You go for 100, right? Okay.
Yeah, because that's what ZWO said, and they put a graph, and that convinced me. They just said gain 100 is their their magical setting, and it's what it is in the ASI Air anyway. Can I even change the gain in that? I'm not sure. I've never messed about with the gain. I've always left it like that, and it's always worked perfectly. As for was exposure time is the other question. Yeah. So up until quite recently, I always shot 2-minute subframes. That's for every target, for everything, like always 2 minutes. Recently, I've changed to 5-minute subframes, and that's nothing to do with the eventual image quality. It's all to do with my hard drive filling up, because when I'm doing such long projects and I've got so many subframes, I recently bought an 8 terabyte hard drive, and that's filling up. So I've gone to 5 minutes just to keep the number of subframes down. But I think there's some common misconceptions about subframes, and people thinking, oh, you need to have longer subframes and able to see more detail or fainter things. But with these modern CMOS cameras that we have, the only thing that matters is your total integration time. How you get there doesn't matter. You could take an absolute bucket load of 10-second subframes, and you would still get the same result, so long as you get those 20 hours or whatever you're aiming for in the end. There's a good video by Dr. Robin Glover about this. He explains it in terms that I cannot understand. I'm not clever enough. But if you want the science behind it, then it is explained out there.
Have you tried binning, which obviously makes the images much smaller?
Yes, I'm with my ASCAR FRA 400. I was well sampled. I had a good working resolution, so I didn't need to bin. With my new telescope, the 130, I'm oversampled, so I bin ×2 as standard. And that gives me a nice boost in signal to noise ratio, which is most welcome, because I haven't even talked about the f-stops or anything, have I? f7.7 is my 130, my current telescope. So that's quite slow by most people's standards, but binning it helps give me a signal to noise ratio boost, which compensates for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've got an RC8, and I've been with that as well, because that definitely improves the dynamic range in the camera. Now
that's interesting, because obviously this is a truncated version of my whole Astro journey, but before I got the 130 PHQ, I did buy an RC8, and I didn't get on with it. I just couldn't do it. It was just too complicated for me, and it reinforced the the whole, like, you get whatever is fun for you to use. Because if I was more mechanically minded and if I enjoyed tweaking everything in the collimation, then I think I could have got on with it. And I can understand the people that like that would really like them, like the RC8. But for me, I just needed it to be simple. I needed it to be idiot proof because I'm not clever enough to handle an RC8.
There's a trick with them. But I think once you get them collimated and understand how to do it with them, it does keep collimation really well. I don't have to mess with it often. But I have a really good process from one of our members, actually, David Davis, and he documented how key is to mechanically align the mirrors first, so the square with the tube. And then once then collimation is really easy.
Oh, I'm just getting flashbacks just hearing you talk about it. It's happening again. No, I didn't enjoy the experience. But one of the good things about my current telescope and the previous one actually is that there are no back focus requirements or anything like that with these refractors.
That's right.
They're like Petzl types, so they're like, oh, they're idiot proof because I can't handle anything more complicated. I just want something simple that's going to work. Yeah. So even if there's a brilliant guide to collimating the RC8, I think, oh no, let's just get something that doesn't need collimating.
Yeah. Questions, anyone?
Yeah, I've got one. I'm interested in the fact that when you're using two lots of double filters, you're loading it towards oxygen.
Yeah.
How is that affecting the picture?
Well, the oxygen is often quite weak, so doubling up on that is useful. However, the downside is that the sulfur is often very weak as well. So you end up with a weaker sulfur signal that you then have to boost a bit more in the post-processing to get it in line with the others. Now, this is something that mono users would be able to deal with much more effectively by simply gathering more data for your sulfur. So it's still a bit of a bodge, but I haven't found it to be a huge issue. It kind of all works out in the end.
Thank you.
Any more, anyone? Okay. Well, listen, Lee, thank you very much. It was a really, really good presentation. Really enjoyed it. Some good questions, and thank you very much. And we'll be in touch again, and hopefully you can give us another talk at some point. Maybe it's collimating an RC8. I don't know.
No, never.
And
Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Good night.
And you will get.
All right, thank you.